Module 4, Planning, Writing, and Revising. This module is really some general advice for all writers that applies to every writing situation about how to develop your own personalized writing process. As I said in class, writing's really a practice. It's something that you can learn the tricks of the trade for, and that you can begin to incorporate your own kind of personal preferences and what makes you most efficient over time. And as you practice more and more, you start to learn strategies that work best for you. And so this module reviews some of the habits or strategies that expert writers do as a way of suggesting to students some things about the writing process that they might not at first glance have thought of or come to writing with these kinds of habits. So expert writers, first of all, spend time planning and revising. Okay, that is actually related to the quote below, where the book talks about how research has shown experts actually compose more slowly than novices or beginners. This is in part because expert writers spend a lot of time doing this third part as well, assessing the audience, assessing the purpose of the document, and planning ahead in order to best meet the needs of the audience and to achieve their purpose. And so they spend as much time planning and revising as they do actually writing. It is not true that the best writers write quickly and they are done. And, you know, as we saw with the ransom notes, sometimes even the best prose or the most complete and grammatical sentences doesn't make for the best writing. And so really professional writers spend a lot of time thinking about what will be appropriate, what will work, and they spend a lot of time planning and revising to achieve that. Professional writers also break jobs into small chunks. Students often don't give themselves permission to write in small bits, like write one paragraph and then step aside and walk away from it for a couple of hours, or come back to it the next day and finish the job. But you can break large writing tasks down into smaller chunks. Expert writers are also flexible, and they have a lot of tools in their toolbox. They use a variety of strategies to invent and draft and plan ahead. And then they also remember to use rules flexibly. And so with your growing kind of understanding of audiences and strategies that work for you, remember always that the audience and purpose are your primary targets. And so sometimes if the rules for formatting or organization that you've been taught won't be the best to achieve your purpose, expert writers give themselves permission to make that judgment call and move forward instead of applying all rules rigidly. Okay. The other thing that expert writers allow themselves permission to do is just to free write and get their ideas out on the page. They don't let that internal editor block them from putting text on the page. So I really encourage you just to, as you draft, write, get your ideas out, and then we'll talk later about why this is important in terms of saving time. Go back and edit and for grammatical correctness and completeness and style and appropriate word choice after the fact, after you've gotten your ideas out there and you've kind of got a good handle on your draft. Some myths about the writing process that students often bring to the classroom. Many of them have been taught a very, as I mentioned on the first slide, rigid order of activities or process that they have to accomplish. And because of this, they often think that they can't do something until they finish something else. Like, I can't move on to the draft until I finish my outline, or I can't finish writing my conclusion until I begin my introduction. Well, those are actually myths. You can do the writing process in any order of activities that works for you. You can go back and forth, you can repeat, and it's true in that idea about breaking writing into smaller chunks, you can write out of order. I'm already finished drafting, I can't go back and rewrite the document. Students a lot of the time get really attached to the text that they've written. And I want to encourage you, as I just mentioned, expert writers allow themselves to free write really crappy drafts, to really just get the ideas out there, and then they allow themselves the freedom to also throw those away. Sometimes you have to test the idea at first and see if it's going to work. But if it doesn't achieve your purpose, well, it was worth the test to see if it would. But you can't get so attached to the text that you're not willing to revise, even going as far as rewriting entire paragraphs to make them stronger. Students often also believe that there are good writers and bad writers, and the good writers get that internal grammar gene in their DNA and it makes them a perfect editor, and then everybody else is just bad at writing. That's not true. You do not have to know every rule of grammar to be a good editor. Our book talks about targeting your specific repeated mistake, and we're going to do an exercise in class called a fix-it page where we begin to track the comments that you repeatedly get from myself as I evaluate your writing to see if we can find your Achilles heel. Typically, students make 1 or 2 mistakes over and over again, and if you can figure out how to catch those, correct them, you can probably resolve 80% of your writing issues right there just by knowing 1 or 2 key rules. Not every rule in the book. The other myth is that my computer will do it for me. Word is good, it's an excellent tool, but it's not infallible. Word can make mistakes. It will sometimes suggest the wrong spellings for things or even give you grammar advice that's inaccurate. And so you just have to be aware. Take it with a grain of salt. The big key to this module is really developing your own writing process. And as we write in this class, I'm going to ask you to think about what works best for you. Now and then we'll do some reflections in class and say, okay, we tried this method. How did it work? You really would just want to become a good observer of your own writing process. How does it feel? What's working for you? What makes you write more efficiently and more quickly? You want to think about, as I said, the fix-it page will help us figure out what editing and proofreading mistakes you most commonly make so that you can target those. You want to observe the times and places you write most efficiently. Do you write better with music, or do you write better in a quiet room without distraction? Do you write better in the mornings or the evenings? Is it easier for you to handwrite drafts before you type them? Just really be aware of your own process and your own preferences. And then in this class, as is true of all writing, writing is actually not the solitary activity people take it to be. It's a collaborative process often, and especially in the business world where we often bounce ideas off of other people about what we should say in a return email. I do this at work all the time. I ask my coworkers, well, how should I address this? What should I say? So we're going to work on this key concept called cycling, where you actually brainstorm, talk about ideas, assess the audience, and have strategies for meeting their needs with others, and then have other people review your writing. So in terms of the writing process, we typically do break it down into 3 primary activities, and you should try to spend an equal amount of time on each of these. So a third of your time should be spent planning, a third drafting, and a third revising. Now, students frequently don't actually do these 2 steps. A lot of the time, students will write 1 draft and turn it in, and that's their final product. And as we mentioned on the first slide, expert writers actually spend a lot more time writing. They spend a lot more time thinking about and planning what they're going to say before they actually draft. And after they draft, they spend a lot more time revising and editing and creating that final product. So you want to remember 1/3 for each activity. Planning in this class, we'll use the PABOK worksheet and the PABOK method to analyze the situation and the audience's needs. And that will allow us to think ahead of time about our tone, the presentation of information, and our document design. What's most appropriate? How should we respond? What type of message is the best one? It's also helpful sometimes for some people when they're planning to write an outline to guide our organization in particular. Our book will give specific organization and structure for different kinds of messages. For instance, in business writing, you often try to sandwich negatives between positives in order to de-emphasize the negative and build goodwill in the message. And so we will work on order of ideas and plan ahead for that. Also, it doesn't hurt to list out ahead of time the key information that will be needed for your audience to act. So what do they need to know? What do you have to make sure you've included in your message? There are all kinds of strategies for drafting. Some people like to just brainstorm a list, and sometimes that's done in collaboration with others. Free writing is where you just write without editing. Often it's good to set a short time limit, anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. Anything longer than that and your brain just starts to give up. And so, but 5 minutes, your brain can tackle a chunk of time and it can write consistently for that amount of time. So that really frees you of that internal editor and lets you get your ideas on the page. Other people like to draw maps or to like write out visuals of their ideas and link different ideas to others. And so this helps them to visualize what they want to write. And one of the things I encourage students to free themselves to do in drafting is to write out of order. If you know what you want to say in the closing paragraph of your business letter, write that first. Get some words on the page to free you up to continue writing the rest of your message. Now, revising is really critical. This is where you turn that writer-based prose into the audience effective prose. And so this is when you turn your writing for you into a product that you can then present to your audience. As the text says, revising means re-seeing it from someone else's perspective. And when you do that, we pick up on things that we might not have otherwise thought of, that, you know, all of a sudden we think about our audience and we think, you know, I'm going to have to rewrite that entire paragraph or reorganize the ideas to make it easier for my audience to read this document. Editing, on the other hand, is much less global. That gets more nitpicky. There you're looking for surface or sentence level grammatical and punctuation correctness, okay? And you're also looking for presentation and clarity. That may mean different word choices. It may mean being more direct. Your style may change. So editing should be saved for last because it's really nitpicky. And in the revising stage, you may throw out entire paragraphs. So if you spend 20 minutes editing it for perfect, complete sentences and then you throw it out, you've lost that 20 minutes. Save your editing for the last, once you have a fairly complete and solid final draft. Some strategies for editing that we'll use in this class are reading aloud to ourselves or others. That helps us to hear tone and language choice and sort of difficulty of reading. I'll ask you to read backwards, so last sentence first, second to last sentence next, in order to check for sentence completeness and fragments. We'll also use the Control F or Control Find function on our keyboard to find coordinating conjunctions like and but, which require commas when they're in a compound sentence, as well as to find subordinating conjunctions like because or until or then, which, depending on their location in the sentence, may or may not need commas. And that will clear up a lot of our comma issues. And then we'll also remember to always use spell check, even when writing emails, but also use it carefully and with a grain of salt. Proofing is the very last stage of revising, and it's that last once through to check for specific correctness of numbers, figures, addresses, and names. So that's when you've got your final, you might have even printed it out, but you just give it a once over to make sure that you haven't misspelled someone's name. One time I found a mistypo on a student's resume. He'd actually misspelled his own name at the top of his resume, and his eyes had just gone right over the top of it, and so we corrected that before he turned it in. When it comes to cycling and getting feedback on your drafts, in terms of peer review, I always think of this as the philosophy of lean in. You know you're going to get feedback, you know you're going to get, it's going to be critical. Going in, accept that someone is going to find something that you have missed and lean into that. Be grateful for it. Focus on the feedback that you're getting and its usefulness to you, not the feelings associated with it. So even if it's negative, you want to put the personal aside and work on the professional, put the feelings aside and focus in on the details and ask for more. For me, that's leaning in. Someone gives me some critical feedback, instead of, you know, saying, oh, gosh, this person is really mean, lean into it. Okay, tell me more. Give me more details. Give me some specific suggestions. How can I fix it? Take advantage of that situation. The last key concept that I really want to talk about that our book highlights is that it's related to the myths that we talked about in terms of business communication in Module 1. This idea that you might be able to get by in a business setting by just writing from templates or form letters. So the book talks specifically about how boilerplate, and sometimes this happens when you're writing like a group report too. What begins to happen is the style is inconsistent. Some of the material might be dated, the tone might actually change from paragraph to paragraph, the word choice, it just sounds like a different person has written individual paragraphs, and that sounds messy to a reader. It's really obvious, and it seems like a less complete and professional presentation. Additionally, boilerplate language or form letters don't carefully analyze the specific situation. And we all know what it's like to get, as like a customer, a form letter that it's clear was written to 500 people, and it isn't really targeted to you as an individual person. That doesn't help us build goodwill and really establish strong relationships with our readers. Okay, so again, the key concepts here, the three big stages of the writing process are planning, drafting, and revising. And they should each take a third of the total time. And you want to begin to develop your own habits and practices for what works best for you.